Welcome back to Celts Are Here. My name's Josh McCafferty, and today we're going to be talking about Borussia Dortmund. Celtic got their Champions League campaign off to the perfect start. On match day 1, they defeat Slovan Bratislava by 5-1 at home. But on match day 2, they face probably their toughest test of the league phase. They travel to Germany to face one of the country's top teams, Borussia Dortmund, for that match. And to tell us a bit more about Dortmund, we have elected to get the knowledge of German football consultant Adam Kahn. Adam told us about Arne Engels a couple of weeks ago. He's come into Celtic and he's done really well, so we know this man is very knowledgeable. So Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Josh. I'm good. It's good to kind of think about Celtic again after losing Engels a few weeks ago. I thought, once players leave the Bundesliga, I don't see them that often. So it's good to see Engels so soon again. One of my favorite players who, like you say, is doing really well so far at Celtic.
Yeah, definitely. He's taken a lot of fans somewhat by surprise, to be honest, in the way he's come in and impacted things so quickly. He looks like a very good player so far for Celtic. We'll get on to him in a bit. But today the main focus is Borussia Dortmund. Obviously, Celtic face them next Tuesday night, 8 p.m, kick-off in the UK. Adam, first of all, how do Borussia Dortmund set up tactically? What is their style of play? And what's it going to be like for Celtic facing them next week?
Yeah, it's difficult to say because obviously, we're recording before their game on Friday against Bochum, which will maybe give us a little bit more insight into how they set up. But they do have kind of two formations that they're testing out at the moment. It looks like Noriyuki Shaheen ideally wants to move to kind of a free at the back with a very mobile midfield, so almost like a free 2-2-3 with like four central midfielders just floating around in the spaces there, and then really free true center backs building out from the back. And he tried that against Stuttgart. And the issue is that it's just there's too many new faces coming in. A pretty incredible tactical shift from a truly counter-attacking side, almost under Edin Terzic, to one now under Shaheen that wants to hold possession. So when they went to Bruges for their first Champions League game, which I think a lot of people also drew parallels to maybe to how Celtic would be. I mean, the Bruges and Celtic play quite differently, but from the stature of the club, you could say they're perhaps quite similar on a European sense. There, they played with a four at the back to kind of get more players into attacking passages. And there we saw again that they have some issues with the fact that, they don't really have the necessarily technical personnel to do what Celtic does so well, which I would say is kind of floating in between spaces, having really fluid players interchange positions. That's something where Dortmund are trying to evolve to, but from a tactical and personnel perspective, they're still quite a far away. So this is going to be a challenging fixture, I think, for Dortmund, and one where you say if they win this match, it's more so because of individual quality rather than them having really that fully formed game plan, which Celtic clearly do.
Yeah, it certainly seems like a period of transition. What do you say their strengths are, though, in terms of what they can do well, although they have had some poor results and performances at the start of the season? What do you think they're good at?
Yeah, I think one of the main aspects of Dortmund is really, especially this season, they have individual quality that can change games in key moments. You see that, for example, especially in the matches against Bruges, but also the match against Frankfurt, their opening match of the Bundesliga season. They have real inherent quality that can come into matches and change games. The big one is Jamie Bynoe-Gittens. I think fans of English football, British football in general, remember him from his very, very brief spells kind of floating around the first team at Man City. But he's a player who can come into games as a wide player and has that individual quality, 1v1 ability to beat players, to score goals. He scored a brace against Bruges off the bench, a brace against Frankfurt off the bench. So he's a good example of kind of where Dortmund are at the moment, where they maybe don't have a fully formed game plan, but they still have so much inherent individual quality. And then otherwise, you also need to look at Sergio C up top, right? His exports for Stuttgart last season shouldn't go unnoticed. I think 28 goals in 28 games in the Bundesliga, which is just, Harry Kane level striking output from a center forward who never really had that in his career beforehand. And it's beyond just goals. He's a really robust center forward. He's good at linking play. He can hold up possession. He can combine well. I think that's especially important concerning Celtic because, Celtic like to defend very, very aggressively with their center backs. They like to step forward, almost man marking. So, having a center forward who can hold up play against really robust center forwards, and then having guys like Bynoe-Gittens or Karim Adeyemi with speed and verticality run in behind and exploit those spaces that Celtic leave available. I think that's how Dortmund can get at them.
Yeah, hopefully for Celtic, the players don't turn up on the night. We'll just have to wait and see. Where can Celtic get some joy out of this Dortmund team and look to take advantage of their weaknesses? Obviously, from watching Celtic, you know some of Celtic's strengths and what they're good at. So where do you think they can take advantage of Dortmund's weaknesses?
Yeah, I would say especially the rotations that Celtic have, the fact that Arne Engels, for example, as an 8 who doesn't necessarily receive the ball to feet, but makes a lot of off-ball movements in behind the lines. Furuhashi also as a center forward who, I mean, he's 1.70 m, right? So he's a center forward who constantly is getting involved, constantly dropping into midfield. And that's where Dortmund really struggled because you have a free at the back of center backs predominantly who want to have something there that they can always kind of have a man orientation to, right? And if you have a center forward like Furuhashi dropping into midfield, then you basically have free center backs defending on the final line against 0 players at times. Yeah. And I think that's where Celtic need to get joy, is when they're really kind of forcing these center backs into decisions that they don't necessarily want to go into, right? It's not about standing on the final line, basically holding hands with the Dortmund center backs, but having those constant rotations, those constant movements. I mean, a good example for Celtic fans, if you want to get a good sense of kind of where Celtic can hurt Dortmund, is really to look at that Stuttgart game. Because, I mean, a center forward like Dennis Undav has a lot of parallels to Furuhashi. He's also a quite diminutive center forward, is not someone who will stand on the final line always, but really someone who likes to roam around the pitch. And, yeah, that's really where Celtic get a lot of joy as well.
I was just going to ask you about that Stuttgart game, actually. At the weekend, they lost 5-1. Was that surprising to you and a lot of people in Germany? And do you think Celtic fans can get excited by that and take some encouragement from it?
Yeah, I think it wasn't necessarily surprising that Stuttgart won that match, especially when you also consider how Stuttgart played in Madrid midweek. I mean, you really have the difference between like a side that is fully functional, has been able to, even with a lot of player personnel turnover in the summer, has really been able to soak up the coach's identity, and you see kind of a clear game plan playing out, versus a Dortmund, like I said, who are really in transition at the moment and have some individual players that aren't performing. So I wouldn't say the fact that Stuttgart won is surprising, but I think the total collapse of Dortmund is. And that's where you also see, it's not just that Shaheen's taking time to bring in his game plan, but also that you really don't have some players functioning. A guy like Marcel Sabitzer, for example, who was elemental in Austria's road to the quarterfinals at the Euros, also in Dortmund's road to the final in the Champions League last season, even made it into the Champions League team of the tournament. He's looked completely amiss on kind of an odd right winger role, which is not suiting him at all. And then also a guy like Julian Brandt, who I would say is the key player normally for Dortmund, has also really, really struggled this season.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I was going to ask about the manager now, Noriyuki Shaheen. He played under Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool for a brief spell. Obviously came into Dortmund in the summer. How are people viewing his stint so far? Is he under pressure a bit because of some of the results and performances, or is there a sense that he'll be given some time to improve?
Yeah, I think both, to be honest. I think that people are obviously frustrated with how the trend's gone because they don't really see any development, right? They don't see how this side has necessarily improved from a pretty dire domestic campaign last season. I mean, for international audiences, most only really tune into what was the Champions League campaign from Dortmund, right? And then you kind of get this rosy image, but in reality, I mean, they finished outside the top 4 for, I believe, the first time in almost a decade in the Bundesliga, right? And they sneaked in because of the UEFA coefficient and then the new Champions League format. But otherwise, they would be playing Europa League football this season. And I think that should also be taken into account when we're talking about kind of the job that Shaheen has on his hands. And yeah, they've obviously had investment over the summer. I mean, pretty big investment. You look at a guy like Sarah Diassi for 26 million. I think Maximilian Bayer also has really not played a big role at all, also come in for upwards of 20. And then even some cheaper signs, like a guy like Pascal Groß is kind of the exact embodiment of what Noriyuki Shaheen wants to bring into this side, a very ball-dominant 6'8" who is really flexible in multiple positions. Like we said, a guy like Arne Engels almost, who was another guy who I said would function well in Dortmund. So they've given Shaheen the tools, and now it's about putting them into action. And right now, there's not really been signs of it. We've seen signs that Shaheen wants to make changes, and we've seen tactical changes, but performances haven't really been at least consistently evident.
Yeah, just on the transfer market, I was looking at it last night actually, and I think Dortmund spent over 60 million in the summer and Celtic spent 30, so they spent over double what Celtic spent in the summer. So it'll be interesting to see how things actually pan out on the pitch tactically. Just in Germany, how are Celtic viewed in the media? Obviously, do they see Celtic as a potential threat who can get something off Dortmund, or do they see this as an easy 3 points for Dortmund?
Yeah, I think that in Germany there's always kind of a bit of a perception about Celtic more widely because of the league they play in, right? I mean, we don't even even if you wanted to watch Scottish football, you couldn't watch Scottish football here. There's not even a broadcast, right? So it kind of shows you also that there's not necessarily I would say we don't necessarily have the seriousness that Celtic necessarily deserve. I think that a lot of people just know Celtic from basically getting thrashed in European competition for the past years. I mean, obviously the defeat to Bratislava changes that, but more generally, I mean, it hasn't been great Champions League campaigns for Celtic in the past, and that's kind of what we see from Celtic. And similarly, I imagine a lot of what Celtic see from Dortmund is only the Champions League campaigns as well, right? So it always gives a kind of altered image. But I think in general, I mean, those who really, really concern themselves with football in Germany also appreciate the fact that, they've made some big strides forward in recent seasons, and especially also in concepts like, making actually a real business plan, stuff like the strategic alignment with the Japanese market also to bring in some different faces. So yeah, I think that for football purists like myself who really actually enjoy more than just kind of the historical contents of a fixture, there's a lot to like about this matchup. And I think that Celtic, at least in my perspective, shouldn't go into this match with too much caution, because I don't see Celtic as a side who necessarily actually play well when they try and play cautious. And Dortmund are at a time right now where they're completely in flux. They don't have a lot of confidence. So I really think that it's an important moment for Celtic to try and soak up the good feeling from their victory in the first round, and really try and take the game to Dortmund also, and try and make almost an end-to-end crazy encounter, which I think Celtic also thrive in.
Yeah, a lot of Celtic's games in the Champions League over the past couple of years, particularly away from home, have been crazy in certain aspects, a lot of goals involved, so that might well be the case next week. In the Champions League this season for Dortmund, obviously got to the final last year, and as you say, they only get into the competition this campaign because of coefficient points, etc. So what are the hopes for them then? Is the aim, you think, to get to the final again, or just make it into the last 16? What are the goals for Dortmund Europe this year?
I think you could have seen me laugh a little bit when you said the goal is to make it to the final. I think that kind of shows where the goal should be. It's a little bit difficult because, I mean, to be honest, I still don't fully understand this format at all, how difficult it even is to make it out of the group stage. It seems like it is actually easier to make it out of the group stage, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that is going to again be the bare minimum goal. And then from there, I think for Dortmund, it's always about kind of winning that first fixture, like beating a side like Tottenham, beating a side like Monaco, beating a side like Benfica, like beating sides that are on a similar level. It's not necessarily about saying, okay, we need to beat Real Madrid, we need to beat Bayern, we need to beat Liverpool, but beating kind of those, I would say, the 6 to 12 ranked sides in Europe where Dortmund float around, and then going out kind of to a side in a respectable manner like a Real Madrid where nobody will say, okay, you need to win those matches. So that's what I would say is the goal. And then the bare minimum, like I said before, is you need to make it out of that group stage.
Yeah, I think the target for Celtic this year is to finish in that kind of 8th to 24th, which allows you to get into the last 16 playoff stage. So interesting to see if both teams can do it. We spoke about Arne Engels already. We're going to speak on him a bit more now. Do you think he could be out to prove a point next Tuesday night? Obviously, you said he could have fitted in perfectly at Dortmund and done well there, so he's got to move to Celtic. Could he be out to prove a point in front of the yellow wall?
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, returning to Germany is always kind of an interesting one when you left the Bundesliga, especially his situation at Augsburg, right, which is a much smaller club than Dortmund. I wouldn't necessarily say it's kind of point to prove. I would say more so a point to prove is like when he returns to like a side like Club Brugge, for example. If something like that happened where, he was at Club Nets, never really got opportunities in the first team. I don't see that necessarily in Dortmund. But I mean, I think like every player, you don't really need any extra motivation to contest an away match in front of the yellow wall in Dortmund Champions League on a Tuesday night. I mean, what more do you need, right? So I think that in that sense, I think Engels will be up for it, just like everybody from Celtic.
Yeah, certainly. Everyone's looking forward to it. Just a bit more on Engels. Is how successful he's been so far at Celtic surprised you, or is it came as expected? His successes so far.
Yeah, I mean, I've only watched the Bratislava game, so I think that also kind of clouds judgment a little bit because it seems that everybody kind of had a 10 out of 10 performance, right? But I would say what really impresses me the most is how quickly he's kind of assimilated into the tactical construct. Just like I said, I mean, Celtic have a lot of fluid, interchanging movements, and I think that's not easy to adapt to so quickly. And in that sense, I think Engels has done really, really well. I'd also say I think it's really exactly the role we discussed that Engels thrives in, right? He's not necessarily the guy who should be now operating in build-up phases the entire time. He shouldn't really be getting balls from center backs constantly in his own third. I think McGregor is kind of the veteran there who has a lot more experience in that role, or even Taylor when he comes in to form a two. So I think that Engels is much better in what is really, really a free role. And like we said, also, I think his set pieces are just like it's such an X factor to have a good set piece taker. And I think Engels can really be that. And so, yeah, I'm really, really pleased. I think it's a good career move also from Engels, even though it's maybe not so, playing against Kilmarnock and Aberdeen every weekend maybe isn't as glamorous as Dortmund and Leverkusen. But I think the fact is that, performances like the one against Bratislava in a Champions League fixture, and especially against Dortmund, I mean, those elevate your stock so high. And 2 free good performances there. And I think for Engels, he'll see kind of the road into the Premier League open up for him, like it did, of course, for who he came in to replace.
Yeah, Matt O'Reilly. Yeah, he's done so well so far, Engels, and Celtic fans have been very impressed by him. Getting back to Dortmund now, Celtic have never ever won competitively on German soil, Adam. Do you think they can do it? I'll push you for a score prediction for Tuesday night's match. What do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, I think that when we say they have never won on German soil, I would say it's probably with the best opportunity yet to change that record. I mean, like we said before, Dortmund are in a really, really precarious situation and have a lot of weaknesses that translate exactly to what Celtic's strengths are. I would say if you want a prediction, I would go with a bit on the fence and say a draw. But I would say more so Celtic coming out really, really strong, maybe even going into halftime with a lead. Like if you had to say which side goes into halftime with a lead, I would go with Celtic. And then I would say I think Celtic perhaps struggle to keep up their intensity for a full 90 minutes. And that's something we saw. I looked at the match against Atletico from last season, for example, the 2-2 draw, which is a really prime example of how you can't even fault Celtic, really. It's just kind of impossible to keep up that intensity for 90 minutes. And that's kind of where they came in again there. So I see kind of similarities to how that game panned out in this Dortmund one as well. And then from Dortmund's perspective, again, they do have a lot of impact to come off the bench and a lot of individual quality that can decide matches. So, perhaps kind of a Jamie Bynoe-Gittens taking advantage of kind of some, I would say, still some defensive weaknesses in Celtic's fullback positions could be kind of how we end up with a 1-1 or 2-2.
I'm sure Celtic fans would take a 1-1 or 2-2 right this minute, Adam. I certainly would as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a very good discussion, and hopefully Celtic fans, if you've been watching this, have found it and learned a bit more about Dortmund. If anyone's travelling over, have a safe journey. We hope you enjoy it. And don't forget as well to like, subscribe, leave comments below, all that good stuff as well. Adam, once again, thank you, and we'll see you all next time.